Good morning, Orlando. This is Orlando's news, weather, and traffic here on News Radio 93.1 WFLA. Filling in for Bud, this is Yaffee.
And I'm Cecily Wilson. Our top stories this morning. Florida election results will be certified this morning, and rains could bring fire relief and also problems. We'll have those details coming up in 1 minute.
So Jim Acosta gets his hard pass press credential back. What happens next? We'll talk about that next on Good Morning Orlando.
At 6:02 right now on News Radio 93.1, the recounts and court fights are over and Florida's elections results become official today. The Election Canvassing Commission meets in Tallahassee this morning to certify the returns from federal, state, and multi-county offices. Machine and manual recounts ended with the Republicans Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis taking the U.S. Senate and governor's races respectively, and Democrat Nikki Fried elected agricultural commissioner. The commission normally includes the governor, but Scott announced last week that would recuse himself. This news brought to you by Tresco Bank, Florida's hometown bank. Well, rain is expected across Northern California Wednesday, where firefighters continue to battle the deadly campfire. The rain could bring in the massive fire burning in Butte County under control, but could also complicate efforts to locate more victims. Already the deadliest fire in California history, the campfire has claimed at least 79 lives. Hundreds more are missing, and rain could wash away DNA and make any remains more difficult to find. Rain also brings the risk of dangerous mudslides.
Right. I mean, right now, from what I hear, there's over 1,000 people missing.
This is amazing. I mean, when you think about the fire and how people are just burning alive in that, it's terrifying. It's hard to think about.
Yeah, we played a story last week from a nurse who narrowly escaped the fire, and it was the most terrifying story I think I've ever heard.
I can't even imagine what that feels like. It's like we said earlier, it's like hell on earth.
Yeah, I mean, the rain coming, it's some good news because it will help them control the fire, but it's bad news because it'll wash away some of the remains that they're trying to identify.
And that means closure is not there for many people.
Yeah.
All right. So as we move on, Chicago police say 4 people are dead after a shooting Monday at Mercy Hospital. Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson said the 4 are the gunman, 2 hospital workers, and a police officer. Johnson said that the shooting started with an argument in the hospital parking lot between the suspect and a female hospital worker with whom he had a relationship. A third person attempted to intervene. Now, the suspect pulled out a handgun. The third person fled into the hospital, and the woman was gunned down outside. That led to a firefighter within the hospital between the suspect and police. The suspect was shot and killed. President Trump is reportedly planning to give U.S. troops the power to protect immigration officers at the border with Mexico. Nearly 6,000 soldiers deployed to the border region currently are not allowed to protect Customs Borders Protection officers if they are attacked. The change would come as Homeland Security officials tell reporters that they've heard reports that groups of immigrants were planning to rush border crossings in California, and Trump deployed the troops to reinforce the border as a caravan of migrant immigrants started heading from Central America towards the U.S. Now, as we're all preparing for our Thanksgiving feast, are you also scooping out those Black Friday deals coming up? Yes. Are you ready? Matt Nasworthy with AAA and Florida says most of us will buy our holiday gifts with a click of a mouse.
A majority of the shoppers, about 79%, are saying they're going to do at least half of their shopping online. And that's compared to about 53% who say they'll do at least half of their gift buying at some brick-and-mortar location. So that's about a 9% increase over last year.
Some Alaska residents will be without sun for the next 2 months. Sunday was the shortest day of the year, formerly known as Barrow County. The sun rising at 12:30 p.m. and setting at 1:43. Daylight isn't expected until January 23rd. Yes, that's right, 23rd. The city is north of Arctic Circle, and anywhere north of the circle experiences polar night every fall through winter.
How do you not sleep all the time?
You just don't go.
That's what I would do.
Totally.
Hibernate.
This is your WFLA news time at 6:06. Read about couple killed in a car accident on their way to their wedding. That's online at WFLAOrlando.com. The first hour of Good Morning Orlando starts right now.
From News Radio 93.1, this is Good Morning Orlando.
And yes, this is Yaffee filling in for Bud. Bud will be back next week. We are just a couple of days from Thanksgiving, so I know everyone is looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that. I'm spending Thanksgiving with the girlfriend, and the girlfriend's family. So that's
whoa.
I know.
You got to prep us for an announcement like that, man.
It's the announcement.
You can't just
throw
that
that
announcement out.
You can't just do that.
Oh, look, Deb just grabbed the microphone.
I'm training Cecily Wilson today, but I want to hear all about being at the girlfriend's house for Thanksgiving.
Yep, that's what's going to happen because my mom's going out of town because my brother lives in Nashville. So my dad and I are going to the girlfriend's and her mom's house.
Wow, Dad and you?
Too. Wow.
Man.
She's making her and her mom are going to make it. They're going to cook it, so...
All right, Deb, it looks like we need to go Black Friday shopping. I need to get a new suit. You need to get a new dress. We're on our way.
Absolutely. And you need to help him find the deal. Sorry, dude. Sorry, dude. No.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
Let me tell you right now.
Mom is listening to the show right now.
And I'm here to tell you, as the other female member of the staff, apart from Stephanie, our phone screener, and Cecily this morning, that after this, the gloves are off.
Oh, yeah.
She's going to expect something sparkly before.
Dude, you're buying pumpkin spice. You're going to the Festival of the Trees before Thanksgiving.
You're like
it's
turkey.
It's disgusting.
Like turkey.
Is the love.
Like turkey, you are done. You are done.
Right,
you're going to have to save your money for something sparkly after this because they're going to throw it down with the food. And
I'm
right?
trying to move on to the news, everyone. I promise I'm trying to move on to the news.
This is the news. We've waited years for this. What are you talking about?
We have Cecily here. We have Paul producing today. We have Stephanie screening her calls at 407-916-5400. We have to talk about the fact that the Trump administration is giving back Jim Acosta's press pass. What happens next? What are my thoughts on the judge's ruling? We'll get to that. And we have Orlando's news, weather, and traffic in just 2 minutes. News Radio 93.1 WFLA. And this is Yaffee filling in for Bud. I know Mark Logus, and I want to thank Mark Logus for filling in yesterday. I know he talked about this some. What happened with the judge ruling that the White House had to give Jim Acosta his hard pass back, his press credential back, to ask questions to Trump. He talked about the details of why it really wasn't a First Amendment issue, according to the judge. The judge, Timothy Kelly, who is actually a Trump appointee, said that the White House ban, he stayed the White House ban on due process grounds. He said, I want to emphasize the very limited nature of this ruling. I have not determined that the First Amendment was violated here. Basically, what they're saying is that because Trump is a part of the government, he's a part of the executive branch, when he removes someone's press credential, there has to be some kind of due process involved. He can't just remove it willy-nilly. There has to be a process that shows that Jim Acosta violated some set rules. Now, President Trump was asked about this on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace, and he basically says it's no big deal. This is what Trump said here.
It's fine. I mean, it's not a big deal. What they said, though, is that we have to create rules and regulations for conduct, et cetera, et cetera. We're doing that. We're going to write them up right now. It's not a big deal. And if he misbehaves, we'll throw him out. Or we'll stop the news conference.
What are your rules going to be? What is it that you're saying?
They're doing them now.
This is over the line, and you lose your press.
They're doing them now. I mean, we'll have rules of decorum. You know, you can't keep asking questions. We had a lot of reporters in that room, many reporters in that room, and they were unable to ask questions because this guy gets up and starts, doing what he's supposed to be doing for him and for CNN, and just shouting out questions and making statements too.
So there you go. Trump basically saying that they're going to come up with conducts. They're going to come up with rules. The White House has put a statement out yesterday. There were some conflicting reports yesterday. Originally, it was reported that the White House was going to get rid of Jim Acosta's press pass after the 14-day stay by the judge. Well, it was reported last night that is not true, that the White House is going to give him back his press pass and let him keep it unless he breaks the rules. Here's what I think about this. For one, the idea that this is a First Amendment issue, I just don't buy that. You don't have First Amendment rights to access to the president when you want it. Because if we had that First Amendment right, then we all would have that right. So that means we would all have a right to access to the president. So it's not a First Amendment issue in the legal sense. I don't really even buy the due process part of it. I understand what they're saying. I just don't buy it. It's one thing to disagree with what Trump did. You can disagree with what Trump did by banning him. But I believe that Trump has a right to do it. That reporters who are grandstanding like Acosta does don't have unlimited access to the president, don't have a right to a press pass. And if they're not doing the job the way they should, and if the president doesn't like him being there, he can ban him from being there. I really don't see a problem with that. Now, Fox News and many conservatives actually supported CNN's lawsuit because what they're afraid of is the precedent that would set. Because they're afraid that when a Democrat gets in office, like a Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren, that what would happen is they would decide to ban Fox News. And they could just ban Fox News for any reason. And a lot of conservatives and Fox News in general were like, we don't want to set that precedent. We're going to support CNN's lawsuit here. That being said, I understand the feeling behind that. I get the feeling of why they would support it. But when I look at it try to look at it from an objective point of view, I just don't buy it. I just don't see when the founders put forward the First Amendment and the Fifth Amendment that has anything to do with press credentials and has anything to do with access to the president. I just don't see that. Jim Acosta still has a First Amendment right to report on Trump if he wants to say what he wants about Trump on Twitter, or to write columns about Trump, or do whatever he wants about Trump, even if he doesn't have access. The other thing I don't really buy is there's still a lot of talk out there that people are afraid that Trump is going to continue. They say he's going to continue, I have air quotes on, to hamper the First Amendment, to get rid of reporters' First Amendment rights, to shut down the media. They're all afraid that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen at all. In fact, I'm seeing the opposite. Whatever you say about Trump, whatever you say, think about what he says, and I believe Trump goes too far sometimes. I believe Trump saying the media is the enemy of the people is too far. We've talked about that on the show before. Bud disagrees with me on that. Mark Logus disagrees with me on that, but I think that's too far. That being said, Trump answers more questions than most presidents I've ever seen. Trump takes more interviews than most presidents I've ever seen. He does more pressers than most presidents I've ever seen. You might not like what he says, but in terms of giving the media access to him, I haven't seen many presidents do that. So there you go.
Yeah, he's loved the media for a long time, and he hasn't stopped loving the media.
He loves the attention. So the idea that he's going to shut down the media, I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. And I think even the left should admit that. 407-916-5400. You can text to 23680 where standard message and data rates apply. So they're getting rid of comedians at the White House Correspondence Dinner, and they're putting forth a biographer, an esteemed biographer, a historian. I'm going to tell you why I actually support this. We have Orlando's news, weather, and traffic in just 2 minutes. News Radio 93.1 WFLA. So all I have to say about the Jim Acosta thing to wrap up there is I have to watch that first press briefing when Jim Acosta comes back. You know, so many people are going to be watching that to see what actually happens there. I wonder if Trump will even call on him. We have a texter who texted in and said what they should do is have signed seating for press at the White House and then put CNN farthest back of the room. I don't know. Trump might just put him up front and ask him the first question. Who knows? Maybe he wants the battle. We'll see. He wants Jim Acosta to grandstand again, so he have a reason to kick him out.
And not only that, the person behind the pulpit, whether it's the president or whoever is behind the podium, they're the person who has the power because they control which way the direction goes. So Jim Acosta stands up and starts grandstanding again. It only makes Trump look stronger and better and blah, 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 especially the people who support him.
Yeah, exactly right. So there was some news that came out yesterday that the White House Correspondence Dinner decided instead of having the key speaker be a comedian, they were going to have historian and biographer Ron Chernow make the keynote address. Now, some might think this is boring. I know some might fall asleep, whatever. Now, Ron Chernow says it will not be dry. He says it will actually be very interesting. He's done interviews before, and he's actually an interesting guy. But Michelle Wolf, this is where all this controversy has started. She was the comedian last year who was the keynote, the lead speaker there. And she got into some controversy about what she said about Sarah Sanders. And many people think that's why they have a biographer and historian do the speaking this year instead of a comedian. And I can understand that because if you remember what Michelle Wolf said last year, in fact, here it is.
We are graced with Sarah's presence tonight. I have to say I'm a little starstruck. I love you as Aunt Lydia on The Handmaid's Tale. I actually really like Sarah. I think she's very resourceful. Like, she burns facts, and then she uses that ash to create a perfect smoky eye. Like, maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's lies. And I'm never really sure what to call Sarah Huckabee Sanders. You know, is it Sarah Sanders? Is it Sarah Huckabee Sanders? Is it Cousin Huckabee? Is it Auntie Huckabee Sanders? Like, what's Uncle Tom but for white women who disappoint other white women?
So, and she got a lot of criticism from that, even from people on the left, because they didn't like how Sarah Sanders was criticized. Here is why I support Ron Chernow doing this. And I know I'm sort of a voice crying out in the wilderness with this, but I am one of the people begging for more civility in politics, more seriousness in politics. We have gone in the complete opposite direction. Trump as well, but the media and comedians have gone so far in the opposite directions, trying to put so much entertainment in politics, that I am just craving for some serious discussion in politics and a serious speaker in politics who can actually bring a real perspective to the White House Correspondence Dinner than just a bunch of comedians, second-rate comedians usually, just bashing each other. I'm looking forward to this, but maybe it's the nerdy side of me.
It is so the nerdy
it's
side
the
of
nerdy
you.
side of
it
me.
Is
but
absolutely
I'm this voice crying out in the wilderness. Please, this is an opportunity, at least in one area of politics, to bring back some civility, bring back some seriousness, bring back some depth. Please.
Bring back some naps.
Oh, stop. I have a feeling you're going to change your mind.
Well, no, I've heard him speak before. He's actually a very good speaker.
Yeah.
What he says is normally extremely interesting. It's just, no.
You want the laughs. You're just a part of the sheeple out there.
Culture.
Who
I
want
want entertainment. Entertain me.
Some seriousness out there. I am begging for civility and seriousness, and that's why I support this. Really, it is. It's the nerdy side of me, but it's true. All right, we have Cecily, who back. She's going to give us the latest news in just a minute. It's 6:29 here on Good Morning Orlando. So Cecily is joining me in the studio right now. She's going to have the latest news, including some interesting news, I guess, about I-4. Anytime I say...
Just go, each
exactly.
time. Oh, my gosh, I-4.
I think everyone listening was doing exactly what you just did, the big sigh. So we're going to get to that in just a minute, but you have some other news for us as well.
Yes, the recounts and court fights are finally over, and Florida's election results are official today. The Election Canvassing Commission meets in Tallahassee this morning to certify the returns from federal, state, and multi-county offices. The machine and manual recounts ended with Republicans Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis taking the U.S. Senate and governor's races respectively, and Democrat Nikki Fried elected agricultural commissioner. Now, the commission normally includes the governor, but Scott announced last week that he would recuse himself. So that news is brought to you by Trustco Bank, Florida's hometown bank. Orlando area motorists have another traffic change to deal with. Deep sigh. On I-4, the ultimate improvement project, it continues. As of this morning, drivers on eastbound I-4 will encounter the exit to Parr Street and Fairbanks Avenue almost 1.5 miles sooner. And it screwed me up earlier yesterday, just with that alone. Just north of the Colonial Drive interchange is where it is. Parr and Fairbanks exits numbered 85 and 86 are being combined with exits 87 at Princeton Street. So get that. The Princeton exit was moved back to its current location back in September.
Okay.
Do you get that?
Yes. Yeah. I think people are going to need to pay attention, though, when they're on the roads.
Because I literally was trying to get off on Princeton, and I'm like, freaking A, I missed it.
Yeah.
Okay, where was it? What happened to it? So you've got to be very, very careful.
I try to avoid I-4 at all costs, but a lot of people can't.
No, you can't. I mean, it saves us time, but now it's costing us more time. Anyway, a TV movie actor says he came across a post on Twitter last night from a former Marine in the Orlando area talking about suicide. James Woods tweeted Orlando police asking them to do a welfare check on a man named as Andrew McMasters, who was sitting with his dog, a black lab, possibly in a Walmart parking lot, and was going to kill himself. Well, the actor then tweeted that McMasters was in Maitland and that he contacted police there. According to Woods, they were able to track down McMasters' home address, but did not find him there. And speaking of veterans, an incoming Florida congressman tells Fox News that people can expect to see a change in the attitude with new Congress. For one thing, GOP Congressman-elect Michael Waltz is a veteran. He says he and his fellow vets have a different notion of what constitutes stress.
The bar for a bad day for me is getting shot at or blown up. So look, I think what the other thing you're going to see with veterans is keeping things in perspective. You know, we resolve things in America through debate and through voting, not through hatred and not through violence. That's what all kinds of countries around the rest of the world do, but not here.
And he says the veterans on both sides of the aisle, people can expect to see less partisanship and more focus on problem solving. WFLA News Time, 6:37. I'm Cecily Wilson, News Radio 93.1 WFLA. Gets these stories and more at WFLAOrlando.com. The first hour of Good Morning Orlando continues now.
Yes, and we continue with the Bloomberg Business Report with Gina Cervetti, who joins me right now. Good morning, Gina.
Good morning.
So the stock market had another crazy day yesterday, mostly because of the tech stocks. Tell us a little bit about that.
All right. Well, we are seeing continued pressure here this morning on equities with the futures indicating a lower open. They have come up a little bit from where we were at earlier, but again, the NASDAQ futures right now looking the worst of the bunch, down about 1%. We had the drop on Wall Street yesterday, as you pointed out, amid jitters over international trade and the tech sector. The tech-heavy NASDAQ was down 3% yesterday. The Dow fell almost 400 points, and the S&P 500, which is the broadest measure of the market with a lot of different industries, down 1.6%. The Bloomberg Orlando Index yesterday doing a little bit better than the broader market, sliding 0.6%, Michael.
Yeah, one of those tech stocks that kind of had a rough day was Apple. What happened to Apple?
Yeah, Apple shares dropped close to bear market territory on concern that consumers are no longer lining up for its flagship iPhone. The stock had closed at a record of just over $232 back on October 3rd. Since then, it's plunged almost 20%, the official bear market threshold.
And we're looking at some other stuff today, including an earnings report. What else are we looking at?
We have October housing starts data. That's groundbreakings of new homes. We're expecting a pretty good increase from what we saw the month before. And we have retailers in focus today as far as earnings: Lowe's, Target, Kohl's, and Best Buy. Now, we did just hear from Lowe's a little while ago. It says it plans to exit its Mexico retail operations after reporting sluggish same-store sales. And it looks like Target missed results in the latest quarter, and the shares of Target are moving lower so far in pre-market trading.
And if you're trying to save a buck or two when you prepare that Thanksgiving meal, looks like Bloomberg can help you out. What's this story about?
Well, for the best price on an all-American Thanksgiving dinner, Mike, you may want to head to the German-owned grocery stores.
Not surprised.
Yeah, those discounters. Bloomberg Intelligence found that the average cost for a Thanksgiving dinner is down about 1.5% from last year, and the cheapest, based on a basket of 20 items, can be purchased at Aldi for a total of $35.83. Shoppers at conventional stores are facing price hikes, while baskets at Walmart are up 7.5%. Walmart costing $23 more than at Aldi. Now, the higher prices this year are partly driven by inflation in eggs, dairy, and some produce, but turkey prices are down across the board. And that, after all, is the main dish for most of us.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, when you're beating Walmart by $23, that's a pretty big deal. So it sounds like you can really get some really good deals at Aldi. So I appreciate you sharing that story with us, Gina. Gina Cervetti from the Bloomberg Newsroom, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.
Thanks, Mike. Have a good one.
You too. I have family members who love Aldi, who swear by Aldi because of the prices. So I'm not surprised by that report at all. All right, we have Orlando's news, weather, and traffic in just 2 minutes. News Radio 93.1 WFLA. And this is Yaffee filling in for Bud. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at BeyondReasonR, at BeyondReasonR on Twitter, or you can send me a friend request on Facebook, and I will accept it. Always posting interesting things there. So Bernie Sanders originally was going after Amazon. He had a war on Amazon with the Stop Bezos Act. But it turned out Amazon just kind of caved in and decided that they were going to raise all of their employees' wages to a minimum of $15 an hour. So Bernie Sanders, smelling blood in the water, so to speak, decided that it wasn't enough, that going after Amazon wasn't enough. Now he has to go after the next big business. He'll just go after one big business after the other. That's kind of how it works with the socialists. But he has introduced, and this has no chance of passing, by the way, but he has introduced the Stop Walmart Act. That's right. He introduced a bill in the Senate that is literally titled Stop a Company, Stop Walmart Act. Think about that for a second. But it's introduced by Sanders and Representative Ro Khanna, a California Democrat, would block big employers from buying back stocks unless they pay all employees $15 an hour. So basically, extortion almost to try to get them to raise wages. Companies also would have to ensure that their CEO's compensation is capped at no more than 150 times the median pay of all workers, as well as allow their employees to earn up to 7 days of paid sick leave. Now, that last part is something that even the Trump administration supports, which I don't. Obviously, it's not the role of government to be getting involved in that. But the Stop Walmart Act. Here's my question for Bernie Sanders. Why stop there? Just, getting rid of their ability to have stock buybacks. Why don't we just dictate what their wages are? Why don't we just pass a law that is the Dictate Walmart Wages Act or something, specifically targeted at one big business, and tell them, hey, you have to pay these people wages. Why? Because the government says so. In fact, why don't we just go deeper than that? Why we stop there? How about Bernie Sanders just passes the Walmart Nationalization Act, where we basically just nationalize the company because they're so big and they're doing things that are so unfair. And Bernie Sanders knows better how to run the economy and to run a private business, and he knows how this works. So we'll have the Walmart Nationalization Act, where we just have the Walmart controlled by the government. Is everyone looking forward to that?
Is it going to make my iPhone cheaper?
The government owning Walmart? Are you kidding me? Your iPhone will now be, let's see.
Well, it's already $1,000. So yeah,
so it'll now be like $5,000. Just look at the government getting involved in healthcare and how the healthcare costs have increased. The government getting involved in student loans and how college tuition has increased. To act like that this is going to be the solution. It's not the solution. It's not the role of government. But this is where all this leads. I know some people hate slippery slope arguments or precedent arguments, but that's where this leads. 10 years ago, no one would have tried to pass something like that. No one would have tried to introduce something like that 10 years ago. But now you have people like Bernie Sanders, who is a legitimate leader of the Democrat Party. Even though he's not technically a Democrat, he's basically a leader of the party now. More and more people are following him in that party. But you have more and more people like him trying to pass off laws like this. And we say, oh, it's crazy. And most liberal economists don't support this right now. But you have to think what things look like in 10 years. In 10 years, they will be passing laws like this. And then people like Bernie Sanders will be talking about nationalization. That's the road we're on when we start going down this road. That's what bothers me. You had Elizabeth Warren earlier this year passing some law that would have people, members of the regular workforce, a part of the board, the stock board and all that stuff. I mean, it's totally just government dictating what companies can do. 407-916-5400. You can text to 23680 where standard message and data rates apply. It's 650 here on Good Morning Orlando. So we keep hearing over and over again, really from both sides of the aisle, more on the left, that the biggest problem in this country is income inequality. But not really just income inequality. What we keep hearing is that the rich keep getting richer, but nobody else is getting any better. And this has been going on for the past 3 decades. And I was one of these people who kind of bought into it. Oh, really? Oh, my gosh, I'm really concerned about this. We need to change that. But it turns out there was an interesting piece in the Washington Post by Robert Samuelson who talks about how this is, in fact, not true, that the stats don't bear this out at all. He says, according to the Congressional Budget Office, it recently found that most Americans had experienced clear-cut income gains since the early 1980s. This is the opposite of what you hear from the left. I always hear from the left that in the 1980s, when Reagan came in office, that's when everything changed for the worse. He says the reason that a lot of people get this wrong is because most studies of incomes have glaring omissions. Some examine only before tax income, others after tax. Many don't include some government benefits like food stamps, Medicare, and Medicaid. Others exclude employer-paid health insurance, which is a big item. The CBO study covers all of these areas. It does confirm that the rich have been getting richer faster. It does confirm that. When the economy has been growing as much as it is, and you have big companies growing as much as they are, the rich are getting richer faster. But it's not true that no one else had gains. If the bottom 99% experienced stagnation, their 2015 incomes would be close to those of 1979. This is what most people apparently believe, but the study found otherwise. The poorest fifth of Americans enjoyed a roughly 80% post-tax income increase since 1979. That's the same as the top 1%, which had a similar gain of nearly 80%. The middle 3 quintiles achieved less, about a 50% rise in post-tax incomes. But everyone has been experiencing income increases since the early 1980s. So what is this political issue really all about then, if it's not about reality? Well, it's about envy. It's about the fact that the rich are getting richer faster and everyone else is jealous of what they have. Instead of looking at how they are doing better in their own personal lives, they are really more about envy. You know, I think the Bible tells us about that, tells us not to do that. Maybe there's a reason why we shouldn't do that. But most of this is about politics of divide and conquer, about class warfare, and about envy, not about reality. The fact is that most of us in this country, including the poor, are doing really pretty good and have been doing pretty good for the past couple of decades. Maybe we should be thankful for where we are and look at the positive, because Thanksgiving's coming up. Just a thought. All right, Cecily is in the studio with me right now. She's going to talk about the latest news in just a minute, and it is 6:58 here on Good Morning Orlando. Good morning, Orlando. This is Orlando's news, weather, and traffic here on News Radio 93.1 WFLA. Filling in for Bud, this is Yaffee.
And I'm Cecily Wilson. Our top stories this morning. The Florida election results will be certified. Yes, this morning, and Chicago police officer is dead, along with 3 other people in a hospital shooting. We'll have those details coming up for you in 1 minute.
So here's my question for you this half hour. What should we do with Saudi Arabia? There's a lot of disagreements over that, even within the Republican Party. We'll talk about that next.
And it is now 7:02 on News Radio 93.1. The recounts and count fights are over, and Florida's election results are official today. The Election Canvassing Commission meets in Tallahassee this morning to certify the results and the returns from federal, state, and multi-county offices. All of those machine and manual recounts that ended with Republican Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis taking the U.S. and Senate seats, respectively, and Democrat Nikki Fried elected as Agricultural Commissioner. Now, the commission normally includes the governor, but Scott announced last week that he would recuse himself. And this news is brought to you by Trustco Bank, Florida's hometown bank. Andrew Gillum won't be governor of Florida. He is no longer in the mayor's seat of Tallahassee. John Daly was sworn in last night to replace Gillum, who was on hand for the ceremony. The 45-year-old Daly is a former Leon County commissioner. He says he is ready to write, and he says he'll be the next chapter in Tallahassee's history. A Chicago police officer is among 4 people killed in a shooting in a city hospital. Officer says a gunman also shot a doctor and a pharmacy tech at Mercy Hospital yesterday evening. The gunman is dead as well, though police are not saying if he was killed by officers or if he took his own life. The incident started in a parking lot over a domestic dispute. In Washington, the Washington Post is reporting that Ivanka Trump used a personal email account to send hundreds of messages to fellow White House aides and cabinet officials. Her use of the personal account reportedly violated federal record rules in some cases. A spokesman for Ivanka's attorney says President Trump's daughter used the private email before being notified of the rules and that she never sent any classified material through that channel. Some White House officials were reportedly worried that Ivanka's use of a personal account would be criticized since the president often slammed Hillary Clinton for use of hers of a private email server while she was Secretary of State. And speaking of the Trumps, President Trump will uphold a long-standing tradition when he pardons a Thanksgiving turkey at the White House today. 2 turkeys named Peas and Carrots have been chosen and will be selected for pardoning today. Both will then be allowed to retire at the Gobbler's Rest exhibit in Virginia Tech. Turkeys are from South Dakota and spent the night in a luxury D.C. hotel.
So I'm trying to think of which one I would pardon. I'm a much bigger fan of peas than I am of carrots, I think. I think I would pardon the peas.
No, it would be opposite.
I
love carrots.
You love carrots?
I don't like the peas so much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it would be the carrots.
So if we ever had Thanksgiving dinner together, I would just eat the peas, you would eat the carrots, and we would just be all happy.
And I'll eat the turkey.
That's a good one. That's right.
Turkey. No tofurkeys?
No tofurkeys.
I thought you were like a vegetarian,
deep fried
vegan.
turkey for Thanksgiving.
I thought you were like a vegan now or something.
I'm an American too.
This is a good point. This is a very good point.
Oh, my goodness. Well, WFLA News Time is now 7:06. Read about a couple killed in a car accident on their way to their wedding online at WFLAOrlando.com. The second hour of Good Morning Orlando starts now.
You're never more than 10 minutes away from the latest news, weather, and traffic. News Radio 93.1 WFLA.
So it's got to be turkey, Paul. It can't be like ham or duck or...
I can do duck. Ham is for Christmas.
Oh, ham
turkey
is for Christmas?
Thanksgiving. Yeah.
So I always had turkey on both. I always had turkey Thanksgiving and...
No. See?
Yes. No. Yes.
Ham is for Christmas.
No, ham is not just for Christmas.
Well, ham isn't just for Christmas.
Ham is for right now. I'm hungry.
Right now.
I'll third that.
So all right. Well, so some people made fun of me, though, because we were talking about side dishes. I forget what the story was. I think Alan Spector was talking about it last week. But I said macaroni and cheese might make a good side dish. Is that?
Might make. It is a requirement.
And mashed potatoes.
Alan Spector made fun of me.
Well, he needs
that mac and cheese doesn't really belong in Thanksgiving dinner.
Are you kidding me?
No, it's a must.
It is a must.
But I will tell you that my sister has a habit of cooking the macaroni and cheese every year. She insists, and she screws it up every year. And again, she's like, I got it
You got to put her out of the family.
Yeah.
You got to put her out of the family.
I know.
Macaroni and cheese is a must every single year, and I must be able to cut your macaroni and cheese like cornbread. If I can stir it, you're thrown out of the family.
Wow. I want to try some of this. I want to
thick.
try some
That's
of this
too thick.
macaroni
You have
and
to cut
cheese
it.
in your family.
Listen, it will change your life.
It will constipate you.
All right. On that note of truth this morning, I appreciate you all joining me this morning. I'm filling in for Bud. This is Yaffee. I have to talk about what is going on with Saudi Arabia. The Trump administration is a little afraid. Well, I don't know if afraid's the right word, but they are reluctant to go after Saudi Arabia and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia as hard as maybe they should. And we're going to talk about that and give my thoughts on it. There's a little bit of division even within the Republican Party on what we should do about Saudi Arabia. And we'll talk about that next. We have Orlando's news, weather, and traffic in just 2 minutes as well. News Radio 93.1 WFLA. Yes, and this is Yaffee filling in for Bud here on Good Morning Orlando on 93.1 FM, but we are still on AM 540 as well. And, of course, you can catch us on the iHeart Radio app or on Alexa. Just say, Alexa, listen to News Radio 93.1. Hopefully that just, turned on all your Alexas out there if anyone is listening. So, and by the way, you can follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. So President Trump on Sunday did a long interview with Chris Wallace for Fox News Sunday. And one thing that came up that really caught my attention was Saudi Arabia. Because basically Trump was asked, what are you going to do about Saudi Arabia? Because there was a report that came out by a number of outlets that the CIA believes, the CIA, our own CIA, the intelligence community, believes that the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman gave the order to kill journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Now, the Saudis are, of course, denying it. We'll see about that. It seemed really weird last week that the Saudi government basically is looking for the death penalty of the people who did it, even though the government might have ordered the people to do it. Could you imagine that? The government orders you to do something, and then you do it, and then they try to seek the death penalty on you? That's just how crazy things are in countries like Saudi Arabia. But Trump was asked about this over the weekend on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace, and Chris Wallace really tried to get an answer out of him, but this is what Trump had to say about that. Trump 2 for me, Paul.
It's a suffering tape. It's a terrible tape. I've been fully briefed on it. There's no reason for me to hear it. In fact, I said to the people, should I? They said, you really shouldn't. There's no reason. I know everything that went on the tape without having to.
And what happened?
It was very violent, very vicious, and terrible.
Did MBS lie to you, sir?
I don't know. You know, who can really know? But I can say this. He's got many people now that say he had no knowledge.
Do you just live with it because you need him?
Well, will anybody really know? All right? Will anybody really know? But he did have certainly people that were reasonably close to him that were probably involved. You saw we put on very heavy sanctions, massive sanctions on a large group of people from Saudi Arabia. But at the same time, we do have an ally, and I want to stick with an ally that in many ways has been very good.
So I just have to say this right here. Trump saying he doesn't know, I think that's BS. I think it's complete BS. Whether the Crown Prince did it or not, I think Trump knows about it. He does. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is to bash Trump. I totally understand why he's doing this. It is a tough diplomatic situation with Saudi Arabia. They are an ally of ours, and they are our first line of defense or offense against Iran. They're a big ally for us against Iran, and they're starting to partner with us to back Israel. And, of course, we get a lot of oil from them as well. There's a lot of different reasons why Trump would have to do this. I totally understand it. He's not the first president to be nice to Saudi Arabia. This has been happening for decades now. So Trump probably has a reason why he's doing this. But I'm not president. I'm just sitting here behind a microphone and trying to tell you the truth. And the truth, the way I see it, is that we know exactly what happened, that Trump knows exactly what happened, that the CIA knows exactly what happened, and that Secretary Pompeo knows exactly what happened. And I have to say, it looks like the Crown Prince ordered that killing of Khashoggi. I mean, really, we know that this kind of stuff happens in Saudi Arabia. And then right afterwards, they try to have a body double, wear Khashoggi's clothes and be on camera. I mean, there's so much evidence. And I'm not the only one saying this. Republican Rand Paul, was on Face the Nation over the weekend as well. And he was asked about this and about Trump's response. And this is what he said.
Well, you know, the Crown Prince, his brother, made a phone call to Khashoggi, the dissident that was killed and dismembered. And that phone call was to tell Khashoggi, hey, it's fine. You can go to the consulate. No one will harm you. Well, you know, we have the Crown Prince's brother making that phone call. I think we have other intelligence that may link brother's phone calls back to the Crown Prince. I think the evidence is overwhelming that the Crown Prince was involved. And so, no, I don't think we can sweep this under the rug. The thing about sanctions is that I think sanctions are pretending to do something without really doing anything. Most of these people are in prison other than the Crown Prince. But the Crown Prince runs the country and we deal with him. If we put sanctions on people who are in prison, are we really doing anything to punish them? They're already in prison. We need to punish who ordered this, who's in charge. And really the only thing they understand over there is strength. I think they will see sanctions as weakness on the part of the president. And if the president wants to act strongly, he should cut off the arms sale, not only because of the killing, but until they stop bombing civilian populations.
So I think Rand Paul is exactly right. I think the evidence is overwhelming, and I think we do need to send a strong message. The idealist in me supports everything Rand Paul says. But the more practical side of me has some reservations, I have to admit. The idealist in me says, let's not sell arms to them anymore. Why are we doing this? And he makes a good point. You know, why do we hate Iran? Well, because they're an Islamist dictatorship state. They support terrorism. They support our enemies. They disrupt the region. That's why we hate Iran, right? Well, Saudi Arabia does pretty much all those same things.
I was going to say, are you sure you're talking about Iran?
Exactly. This is the point. Saudi Arabia, now they don't directly support terrorism, but they support the ideology. And that ideology, the Wahhabism, and they support those outlets, and those outlets basically fund the ideology that spreads across the world and fuels terrorism across the world. So Saudi Arabia does a lot of the same stuff that Iran does, yet we're friends with Saudi Arabia and we hate Iran. It does show that there's some hypocrisy there. But there is a reason why it's probably best to keep them as our ally, and I'm going to get to that next. We have Orlando's news, weather, and traffic in just 2 minutes. News Radio 93.1 WFLA. So I was asking the question in the last segment on what should we do with Saudi Arabia, because Rand Paul basically says that Saudi Arabia is not our friend. Now, Trump is trying to hold an alliance with them, and we're going to have a huge arms sale going to Saudi Arabia very soon. But the question is, what should we do? Should we cancel that arms sale? Should we just keep with the sanctions? Should we do something about the Crown Prince? Or should we basically do nothing? Well, let's go to... I made the point also that we hate Iran because a lot of the bad stuff they do, but Saudi Arabia does similar stuff. It's not exactly the same, as I pointed out, but there is some similarities there, yet we're friends with Saudi Arabia and hate Iran. So let's take a call here who has a comment on that. Let's go to David in Orlando. David, what's your take on this?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I think you do a fantastic job filling in. I always love to hear you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, sir. The point I wanted to make is I have a very close friend who escaped Iran.
Uh-huh.
And he says that the government literally incites riots and has people shouting death to America.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I think all the points you made about Saudi Arabia are very valid. But there is a big difference when you have someone that's really trying to brainwash people to kill Americans. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, yeah, no problem, Dave. And I just want to say you actually bring up a really good point in that the government, at least of Saudi Arabia, says they are our ally, and they say that they're going after terrorists for us, and they have helped us in some situations. So there is a difference, at least in that point of it, where Iran just basically says they want us to be dead. Saudi Arabia, you're right, doesn't come out and say that.
Exactly. Thank you.
All right, no problem, David. I appreciate that. Here's the problem with doing anything about Saudi Arabia. Let's say we depose the crown prince. Let's say we have regime change in Saudi Arabia. If we somehow become Saudi Arabia's enemy, the government, and then we succeed, and the government of Saudi Arabia is gone, what fills that vacuum? What fills that vacuum? What would fill that vacuum would be a lot worse. The fact is the Saudi government has a hard job because in one sense they're trying to modernize, they're trying to be more like the West. But they have a huge part of their population that is still very radical, that still wants to bring the country back to what they believe was the Islamic golden age, and that would love nothing more than the government, than the crown prince and the king of Saudi Arabia to be gone so they could implement a sort of caliphate that would be way worse than anything we deal with the government of Saudi Arabia right now. This is the problem, because the Saudi king and the prince, what they have to do is they have to please some of the more radical parts of their population so they don't try to rise up, but they also have to please the more modernizing parts of their population, and this creates a lot of problems. There is one thing that Rand Paul said, though, on Face the Nation that I wholeheartedly agree with that has to do with selling arms to Saudi Arabia. This is what he said.
Here's my point. The arms sales don't make us safer. They make us less safe. When we sell arms to a foreign country, it should not ever be for jobs. It should be for our national security. The Saudis involving us in their war in Yemen is a disaster. 17 million people live on the edge of starvation. If we get involved in another civil war in the Middle East, that's not good for our national security. That just drains our natural resources.
So one thing he said there that I really agree with, we should never sell arms to another country for economic purposes. It is a bad precedent, in my opinion. I'm not saying we shouldn't gain some economic benefit when we do it, but the main purpose of selling arms to another country should be for national security reasons. And when we start making the argument, well, this helps our economy, that sets a bad precedent. That's the whole military-industrial complex that that's what Eisenhower was actually concerned about when he made that speech, that building up the military for merely economic purposes, it should not be why we sell arms. I wholeheartedly agree with that. We should be tough on them. We should be tough on the Crown Prince, but I think right now we still need them as an ally. The practical side of me says that. The idealistic side of me supports Rand Paul, but I understand reality on the ground. We have to support the government there because that vacuum would be even worse.
So what do you do? I mean, because Rand Paul's not talking about regime change, so there's no vacuum there.
This is true, and he's not. And he's also said that he wants to continue trade with them. He doesn't want to continue getting rid of trade on oil and all of that stuff. I agree with him. I think we should stop the arms sale, or we should at least not sell as much. And if we're worried about the economic consequences, what you do is you make a delegation that goes to all the other countries that are mad at Saudi Arabia and have them buy some of the arms to make up that cost. I think that would be totally possible because a lot of countries, especially in Europe and other areas, are really not happy with what Saudi Arabia did, and I think they would make up that cost. That's what I think you do. All right, it is 7:30 here on Good Morning Orlando. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Good Morning Orlando. This is Bud filling in, or this is Yaffee filling in for Bud. Deb and Cecily are like having a good old time here, talking to each other. And then the mic comes on. I'm like, Cecily, the mic's on. Mic's on. Radio. See, she's from TV originally.
I'm from TV.
So she's
I'm
used
for
to
the red light.
She's looking for the red light in the camera. All right, so Cecily, the first news you have for us is finally, we have we're going to have certified election results in Florida.
Yes, absolutely. The Florida voters, the fight is over. You can rest easily. Election results are being certified in just hours. The Election Canvassing Commission meets in Tallahassee this morning to do just that, to certify the returns from federal, state, and multi-county offices. Machine and manual recounts ended with Republicans Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis taking the U.S. Senate and governor's races respectfully, and Democrat Nikki Fried elected agricultural commissioner.
I know, I always get that
right?
wrong.
That's my new teeth this morning. The commission normally includes the governor, but Scott announced last week that he would recuse himself. Can we say that again? Okay. Recuse himself. Yes, that's it. That's what's going to happen. The news brought to you by Trustco Bank, Florida's hometown bank. Officers, guess what, are letting a deer intruder off with a warning.
A deer, like D-E-E-R?
A deer. Yes, not my deer, but a deer. Yeah, it was found running through the home in Houston, Texas. The deer apparently crashed through a bedroom window there in Kingwood area. The confused and deer-dazed ran through the home, slipping and sliding across the wooden floors as it turned corners. It looked like a scene out of a comedy skit. But the officer said because nothing was missing from the house, they would just let the deer go with a warning.
They thought they were going to arrest the deer, put the deer in handcuffs, and put him in a holding cell overnight.
Exactly. So that didn't happen. So it's all good. Well, guess what? A missing lottery ticket that went through the washing machine is fetching just over $10,000. Yes.
Oh.
A 24-year-old Lusby, Maryland woman said that she bought the several mega $1 million ticket several weeks ago, and when the jackpots were really high, and noticed that one of her tickets was missing. She found the missing ticket last week, and luckily the ticket was still legible. So
good.
She was able to claim her prize money, and she says she's going to spend it on Christmas for her son.
That could have been the most expensive load of laundry in history.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
How could you wash it in the laundry? Right. So luckily she was able to get that. And speaking of son to father, the father of a Chicago area high school football player is accused of influencing the outcome of a recent game by dressing as a referee.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He is the center of a lawsuit filed by the school and Simeon Career Academy against the Illinois High School Association. Plaintiffs allege that the parent of a player from Nazareth wore his referee uniform and was involved with the calls. The referee.
Nobody else noticed at the time?
Yeah, apparently not. Yeah, he was not officiating over the November 10th game. The suit is asking the winner of the game is disqualified, and no winner has been declared. They also ask that the father and other referees no longer be allowed to officiate any games.
Well, I mean, that just shows you. They say just make it. When you want to go somewhere, just make it seem like you belong there.
Yeah, well,
just act like you belong there.
He took it to another level.
I mean, that's what he did. He just acted like you belong there, and everyone just said, okay, you're a ref.
We take his call.
So it shows that's true.
That's it. All righty. Well, WFLA News Time. It is now 6:39. I'm Cecily Wilson, News Radio 93.1 WFLA. Get these stories and more at WFLAOrlando.com. The first hour of Good Morning Orlando continues now.
Oh, and thank you, Cecily. We're having a lot of fun this morning, and you have a chance to join in on the fun right now for Sound Judgment. Yes, we have the Sound Judgment game coming up next. A great prize, Trans-Siberian Orchestra tickets, which I want to go to. I've never been. I've always wanted to go. So you have that great prize, but you have to call right now, 407-916-5400 for the Sound Judgment game. Paul, you looked like you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say the whole idea of act like you belong there, you have no idea how well that works.
I know. You do that all the time.
I do it all the time, and it works so great.
That's why you're here. You weren't even hired. You showed up one day. And
Exactly.
I'm just kidding. All right, Sound Judgment's coming up next, and we have Orlando's news, weather, and traffic in just 2 minutes. News Radio 93.1 WFLA. And now we have Sound Judgment for a great prize. The phone lines are jammed right now. You have to wait for a wrong answer, but then you can call 407-916-5400. And before we get to the question, Stephanie is here, and she's going to tell you what you can win.
That's right. We have a great pair of tickets to the Trans-Siberian Orchestra Winter Tour on December 15th at the Amway Center.
All right, Trans-Siberian Orchestra. It's something that I've been thinking about taking my girlfriend to. I've never been, but I always hear it's really great. So you have a chance to go for free if you get this question right. So Rick Scott is now going to be your next senator for Florida after beating incumbent Bill Nelson in a close election. I'm going to talk more about that in the next half hour. I want you to listen to Rick Scott talking about Nelson conceding, and then use your sound judgment to tell me, what year was Bill Nelson first elected to the Senate? What year was he first elected to the Senate? Here's Rick Scott.
He was gracious. He congratulated me for the win. I told him if he has any ideas of how to, do my job better, don't hesitate to call me. I represent everybody in my state. We have 21 million people. I want to continue to make sure Florida beats Texas in job creation every month. And I'm excited that Ron DeSantis is the new governor, and I think he's going to continue our policy of focusing on job creation. But he was gracious and called and said congratulations.
So Bill Nelson has been holding office in Florida for a long time, but what year was he first elected to the Senate? What year was he elected? Let's go to line 4. Line 4, what year?
1983.
Nope. Not quite that far back. Not quite that far back. Like I said, he's been in office for a while, but what year was he first elected to the Senate? Let's go to the toll-free line. Toll-free?
1979.
No. You're going way too far back. Way too far back. Much sooner, much sooner than that. Let's go to line 1. Line 1.
Hi, good morning, Jeffy.
Good morning, sir.
Was it 2001?
Oh, you are so close. So close. Not quite that soon, but you were about as close as it can get. Let's go to line 2. Line 2.
Year 2000.
That's right. I have a feeling maybe the last person was looking at Wikipedia and noticed he assumed office in 2001, but he was elected in 2000. So you are our winner, and you get those Trans-Siberian Orchestra tickets. You excited about that?
I sure am. We've been hoping for those.
Great. Awesome. It's a great prize. I hear so many people that tell me they go that they just love it. I really need to make an effort to go this year. All right, what's your name? Where are you calling from today?
Yeah, the name is Dan, and I'm in Apopka.
Dan from Apopka. Well, I'm going to put you on hold, and Stephanie's going to tell you how you can get those tickets, okay?
Thank you.
All right, congratulations on that.
Another happy contest winner on WFLA.
So, yes, Rick Scott is finally going to be certified as the next senator from Florida. I'm going to talk about the whole recount kerfuffle. That's right, kerfuffle. That's what it was. The whole recount mess. I'm going to talk about that in the next half hour. And the new Democrat line that they keep saying over and over and over again, not just in Florida, but in other states as well. And why? Well, they're wrong. So we're going to get to that. We have the Rush Morning Update coming up next, though. And, of course, Orlando's news, weather, and traffic in just 2 minutes. News Radio 93.1 WFLA. Yes, this is Yaffee filling in for Bud. We are close to Thanksgiving. By the way, if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Beyond Reason R. You can send me a friend request on Facebook as well. You're listening to us, News Radio 93.1 WFLA. You can catch us on FM 93.1, of course, but you can also catch us on AM 540 or also on the iHeart Radio app or on any of your smart devices, Google, Home, Alexa, all of that stuff. So, Paul, what is happening to me? How is it that Sunday, 2 days ago, you know where I am on Sunday? It's not Thanksgiving yet, Paul.
Uh-huh.
It's not Thanksgiving, and I am at a Christmas thing.
Really?
I am at Festival of the Trees. We were giving out tickets for that last week.
Mm-hmm.
Festival of the Trees. And I've been before. I took my mom years ago, but it's before Thanksgiving. And here I am in a place that has Christmas trees.
Well, I mean,
and
why were you
Christmas
there?
music.
You just feeling festive early this year?
So,
you're getting older. That's what it is.
So we were giving away the tickets. And, of course, my first thought was, oh, my girlfriend would love to do something like that. So here I am, before Thanksgiving. I don't like doing anything Christmassy before Thanksgiving. I get mad when I go in like Target or something and there's Christmas trees everywhere before Thanksgiving. And here I am looking at Christmas trees, having a good time.
I was going to say, so you're telling me you're liking things you don't normally like because of a woman?
I can't believe it. What is happening to me?
You're becoming one of us.
You're becoming one of... I never thought this would happen. By the way, the Festival of the Trees was really cool. They had a Magic decorated tree, like Orlando Magic. Well, I had all the Orlando sports. They had a Gators one, Stephanie. I thought of you.
It was ugly. I saw
Stephanie, our call screener, is a big Gators fan. They had a Gators Christmas tree there. I thought of you. I could have bought it for you, but it was like $500.
I saw the wine cork wreath. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I sent that. My mom's a big wine fan, so I sent that to her. So, yeah, we had a good time. And by the way, before that, we had lunch in College Park area. And there,
you're getting up there, my friend.
Well, I mean, it was like Graffiti Junction. It was just like a burger
you're having like College Park lunches before you go to Festival of the Trees.
Across the street from the restaurant, there was a really cute Christmas store that had all these like really nice decorated, almost like the Festival of the Trees, but it was like a store across the street.
Wait a minute. Did you say cute Christmas store?
I did.
Wow.
So I took Steffi there first, my girlfriend, and we looked in, and some of that stuff was even better than what they had at Festival of the Trees, believe it or not. I can't remember what the store was called, but it's over in College Park, so a little free shout out to them. But
you've had all of the Kool-Aid, man. You're all the way in.
I'm drinking the love girlfriend Kool-Aid. She has complete control and power over me now, and it's it's weird. I don't know what's happening to me.
You're going to be picking out rugs soon.
I know. Oh, dear God, no. I didn't hold her purse, though. Did not do that yet.
You will. Don't worry, you will.
All right, Cecily is in the studio. Deb's sitting next to her as well, just enjoying every minute of that. She has the latest news for us, including the latest on the recount. The recount is over. And finally, we'll actually have certified election results. It's 8 o'clock here on Good Morning Orlando. Good Morning Orlando. This is Orlando's news, weather, and traffic here on News Radio 93.1 WFLA. Filling in for Bud, this is Yaffee.
And I'm Cecily Wilson. Our top stories this morning. Florida election results are hours away from being certified. And suspect shot after allegedly attacking deputies. We'll have details coming up in just 1 minute.
So somebody tell me, and I actually have a text on this already, and I think I know the answer as well. Somebody tell me, how does Rick Scott lose 2,000 votes all of a sudden from a manual recount? We'll get to that next.
And yes, the results and the recounts are over. The count fight is over as well. Florida election results are being certified in just hours. The Election Canvassing Commission meets in Tallahassee to certify those returns from the federal, state, and the multi-county offices. So the machine and manual recounts ended with, of course, Republican Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis taking the U.S. Senate and governor races. Democrat Nikki Fried is elected agricultural commissioner, and that commission normally includes the governor, but Scott said he is going to recuse himself from that. That is the news brought to you by Trustco Bank, Florida's hometown bank. An attempted murder suspect is in the hospital after he allegedly attacked a sheriff's deputies in Volusia County and was shot in return. The sheriff's office says that yesterday afternoon, 33-year-old Dylan Parker drove head-on at one deputy, fired on a second deputy, and was met with return fire from another deputy and a DeLand police officer. No law enforcement officers were injured, and Parker was expected to recover from his gunshot wounds to his chest and leg. He was wanted. He was wanted on November 10th for a shooting that critically wounded a man in DeLeon Springs. Rain is in the forecast for Northern California this week as firefighters continue to battle the deadly Camp Fire. While the rain could help bring the massive fire burning in Butte County under control, it could also make it very difficult to locate more victims. Already the deadliest fire in California history, the Camp Fire has killed at least 79 people. Hundreds more are missing, and rains could wash away DNA and make any remains harder to find. Rain also brings the risk of mudslides and flash flooding there. A Chicago police officer is among 4 people killed in a shooting at a city hospital. Officer says a gunman also shot a doctor and a pharmacy tech at Mercy Hospital yesterday evening. The gunman is dead, as well as through a police officer. They're not saying if he was killed by officers or if he took his own life. The incident started in a parking lot over a domestic dispute. And finally, Illinois' largest group of school board members is voting against arming teachers. The Illinois Association of School Boards voted over the weekend to formally oppose plans to the State House to allow teachers to carry guns, which is probably a good thing. The Association of School Boards released a statement that used rural records in Illinois to support the idea, but schools in Chicago, the suburbs, and larger downstate communities say the proposal would not create a safer environment for the students.
You know, that's an issue we've talked about a lot on this show. Bud supports that as well. In Florida, they passed a law, after the Stoneman Douglas thing that allowed administrators who are trained to be armed but not teachers. But Bud and I both agree that we support that teachers, if they are trained properly, should allowed to be armed as well.
Well, again, you have to be very trained properly because that could open up a whole new can of worms in that.
It's definitely an issue that's been a lot of debate on this show in the past year or so.
Absolutely.
You also have to have more training for your police officers in that instance.
True.
So you don't end up with a situation like the guy who was the security officer who got killed when he was stopping the gunman. So now you have to look at that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, WFLA News Time right now is 8:07. We want you to read about Florida man's blood alcohol content measured at 8 times the legal limit. Wow.
How is that even possible?
I don't know.
I know physically how. You just drink a lot.
8 times the legal limit. You got to read about it. It's right there on the FLAorlando.com. So the third hour of Good Morning Orlando starts right now.
Welcome to the 50,000 watt front porch. News Radio 93.1 WFLA.
And this is Yaffee filling in for Bud. We have Paul producing and Stephanie screening your calls at 407-916-5400. So I have to give my take on the whole recount mess. The manual recount is over. The results are in. It's going to be certified today. But I think one person actually got it exactly right, and that's Marco Rubio, our Senator Marco Rubio. He tweeted this out yesterday, and I agree with him. The controversy over Florida election wasn't over automatic recounts required by law. No one opposed recount. It was about 2 counties who failed to comply with the law and lawyers trying to use courts to challenge election law after the election. I agree with him. We're going to talk more about this. And how did Bill Nelson pick up some 2,000 votes after the manual recount? Well, I think I have an answer for that as well. We'll have that in Orlando's news, weather, and traffic in just 2 minutes. News Radio 93.1 WFLA. Yes, this is Good Morning Orlando on 93.1 FM and, of course, AM 540. We finally have results, certified results, will be certified later today, of the elections in Florida, especially for governor and for Senate. And Rick Scott will be the senator. Ron DeSantis will be the governor. And Marco Rubio made a good comment. I said it before the break, and I'll say it again. So the controversy over, he tweeted this out, the controversy over Florida election wasn't over the automatic recounts required by law. No one opposed recount. It was about 2 counties who failed to comply with the law and lawyers trying to use courts to change election law after the election. Rubio makes an interesting point about lawyers, but there's another thing that I found really interesting that, kind of troubled me, actually, because I don't understand it. Before the manual recount, Bill Nelson trailed Rick Scott by more than 12,000 votes. After the recount, the manual recount, Rick Scott only won by 10,033 votes. Where did the 2,000 votes go? Why would a manual recount make that much of a difference? I know 2,000 is kind of a drop in the bucket compared to the whole state, but in a really close election, which we've had in Florida, that could make a difference. That's a pretty big swing. Historically, recounts only have a difference of maybe a few hundred at most. This is 2,000. Why did that happen? Well, I'll tell you why, and Marco Rubio made the good point. Actually, a texter said the same thing, said accepting invalid ballots. And I think there's on to something here. The fact is, the lawyers of the Democrats especially really wanted that manual recount because they knew they could come in and they could dispute a lot of ballots that were counted. So you have ballots that weren't counted in the machine recount because they weren't marked right, which it should be easy to mark a ballot right, in my opinion. They weren't marked right. They were circled or something else. And the lawyers come in and they say, you know what? A lot of these ballots should be counted because, well, we're looking at the intent of what the voter said. So if it wasn't marked right, but it looks like it should have been marked for Nelson, then it should be counted, and we're going based off intent. That's why the lawyers were there. And I think that's where a lot of these votes came from. But whatever the reason, it's a little disturbing that the difference was some 2,000 votes. And I never really saw a good explanation for it. But I think the lawyers getting involved and them looking at intent and looking at ballots and provisional ballots that probably shouldn't have been counted, but all of a sudden they're counted in a manual recount. You know, something else interesting happened to me last week. A friend of mine who was a Democrat, actually happened to her, she got an email from a Democrat Political Action Committee, one that's End Citizens United is what it's called. The email was calling for people to donate to Bill Nelson for the recount. It said here, this is what the email said. It said, Bill Nelson came just inches from saving his Democratic Senate seat in Florida. The margin is so close it triggered an automatic recount. But then it said, 2, sadly, recounts are expensive and Bill's campaign is out of money. And then it calls for people to donate and click there and donate so Bill Nelson can get money for the recount. Why would you need money for the recount? The recounts are automatically done by the state of Florida and are paid for not by the candidates, but by the state of Florida.
You got to pay the lawyers.
Exactly. Duh. To pay all the lawyers coming in. Now, both sides had lawyers coming in. But that's why they want the lawyers to come in. The Democrats wanted the lawyers to come in because that was their best chance of winning because they could look at a lot of these ballots and say, well, the intent was this or the intent was that, and we're going to change it. And all of a sudden, Rick Scott lost 2,000 votes? Now, it was insurmountable. It was just too much. You're not going to overcome some 12,000 votes in a recount. It was never possible. But they tried. But now what the Democrats are saying in Florida and in Georgia, that, yeah, we lost technically, but it really shouldn't be legitimate because of voter suppression. We're going to talk about that next of Orlando's news, weather, and traffic in just 2 minutes. News Radio 93.1 WFLA. All right, and we're taking your calls here. Let's go to Joe in Titusville. Joe, what's your take on this?
Well, my take is the reason there's a difference is because when you're scanning documents, there's an eye in there that reads them. Those eyes have to be cleaned periodically because debris off the papers come off and get on them, so they wind up inaccurate. And there's probably a 1% to 2%.
Your explanation is that the eye and the screeners was messed up, and so there was 2,000 different votes for Nelson?
Well, look at how many were scanned and where the errors came from. Okay, I work on electronics. I work on these scanners. Okay.
But all 2,000 went to Nelson?
I don't know. There's probably some went to both. I don't know. I didn't do the scanning. I'm just telling you one possible reason why there are errors.
Okay.
There's also a fact of why was Broward allowed to do a ballot that disagrees with the state of Florida and the way they put out the guidelines they put out for a ballot? and there was
because Broward's dumb.
There was a 23,000 vote difference between.
Well, I know. And then they say it's because the Senate. Yeah, and they say because the Senate race was right below the instructions, and a lot of people missed it. You know, if you're going to vote for something this important, maybe you should check that you're voting for the important things. I don't think it's too much to ask for. Really, I mean, I understand it. They should really fix that. It's a problem, but I mean, come on. It's one of the biggest races. If you're there to vote and you're like, gee, you know, where's the Senate race? I came here to vote for that.
It just goes to show how many people don't pay attention. The voting, they don't pay attention.
Well, the fact that all those amendments passed is a bigger reason why people don't pay. Big explanation how people don't pay attention. Let's go to Edward in Orlando. Edward, what's your take on this?
Just two quick comments. One on the election and the ballots. I think Rick Scott kind of missed the train there when he could have suspended that supervisor down in Broward County, because she'd been cited quite a few times on irregularities down there. One time even disposing and burning, I forget, was it 1,100 or 2,000 ballots, something like that?
Yeah. I mean, the reason why he didn't do that is because he was a part of the election.
Yeah,
so
that would have been a horrible idea.
He recused himself and didn't want to seem like he was meddling. But I totally get what you're saying. I mean, she could have been fired a long time ago, even before the election, and so you could blame Rick Scott for that.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. I also one other comment.
Yeah?
I think President Trump and his wife, during the next week or two, ought to really take a look back at laying a wreath at Arlington Cemetery, because I think that's going to come back and hit him should he decide to run in 2020.
I mean, that is a big topic. I didn't get to it this morning, but he was on with Chris Wallace, and he actually admitted that was a mistake not doing that on Veterans Day. One of the few times he actually admitted that was a mistake and he probably should have done it. That was very interesting. All right, Edward, I appreciate your call. Good point on that. Let's go to Mike in St. Cloud. Mike, what's your take?
Hey, Yaffee. As far as the discrepancy in air quotes with 2,000 votes, make no doubt about it, the number one problem in Florida and across the country is intentional voter fraud and deception. But the problem is not limited to Broward and Palm Beach. Hillsborough also came up on the radar screen as intentionally not counting votes. It is purely Democratic, and the laws are there, but these Board of Election supervisors are intentionally circumventing, hiding, playing games. How do you take a box of ballots that come in the back door, legitimately through the back door, and then lose it over the next 10 feet, unless you're intentionally concealing, playing games?
Another thing that was really interesting, too, is that when they did the machine recount, it actually showed up more votes for Rick Scott than Nelson. So they were conveniently 2 minutes late, after that.
And Hillsborough did the same thing.
Yeah.
Hillsborough said, no, we're not going to report because Scott went up.
Yeah, very interesting. I appreciate your call, Mike. I have much more to say about this, so we're going to have the news with Cecily at the bottom of the hour. Then after that, I have to talk about it. I haven't got to it yet, but I have to talk about how the Democrats are now pushing this theme that there's voter suppression out there. So we're going to get to that next. It's 8:29 here on Good Morning Orlando. Welcome back to Good Morning Orlando. This is Yaffee filling in for Bud, and we have Cecily here filling in for Deb. She's going to have the latest news, including the fact that the Florida election results will finally be certified. And Budweiser offered Thanksgiving toe to go. We'll have some other stories as well, but go ahead with the breaking news.
Okay, well, the breaking news is the results of Florida's midterm election are being certified later today, but we already know the winners. Rick Scott will be the next Florida U.S. Senator. Ron DeSantis has won the governor's race, and Democrat Nikki Fried will be the new agricultural commissioner. The hand recount this weekend came up with essentially the same numbers as the machine recount, and all that's left is for the ballots to be certified, and that's going to happen later today. The news brought to you by Trustco Bank, Florida's hometown bank. Guess what? Thanksgiving traffic is expected to be up by 5% in Florida, and AAA and Budweiser are at it again, combining to help those who celebrate the holiday get home safely. They're offering the Tow-to-Go service starting tomorrow and continuing through 6 a.m. on Sunday, and it provides free rides home for a driver and their vehicle within 10 miles. Tow to Go is available to AAA members and non-members by calling 855-2-TOW, T-O-W, the number 2, GO. All right? So,
okay.
855-2-TOW to Go.
And, if you're like that one person you talked about in a story earlier that was 8 times above the legal limit.
Yeah, they're going to need it.
They should probably give them a call.
Absolutely. Put it on speed dial.
Just a thought, yeah.
Just saying. The $1.5 billion Mega Millions jackpot is still unclaimed. Really? In late October, the winning ticket was purchased in Simpsonville, South Carolina, to become the state's first Mega Millions jackpot one. Yeah, the winning tickets numbers matched all six numbers drawn, but the winner still has not redeemed their prize.
The winner doesn't want $1 billion?
$1 billion. Maybe they thought they washed it in the laundry. I don't know, right?
I don't know what's going on there.
Well, in South Carolina, the law allows the winner to stay anonymous if they wish, but they only have 180 days since the ticket was purchased to claim the prize, so the clock is ticking. Wow. 180 days. So I don't know where we are in that.
What happens if nobody claims it?
It rolls over again, I guess.
That's what I was going to ask. Does it go back up to $1 billion if nobody claims it, or do they just keep the money and act like it never happened?
No, it has to roll over. It has to. I mean, they've got to put it back in the pot, I would think.
I don't know.
They don't have to. They probably should.
Right. It would, in a way, though, it would be the ultimate irony after all those people buying those tickets like crazy lines in the stores and no one gets the money.
No
that would be the ultimate irony. Wow.
Because I would be thinking, okay, someone's got to win. Let me check my numbers. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So finally,
that one,
right. So finally, before we leave, you may have thought Big Bird was unrealistically gigantic, but he's still not the largest bird to ever walk the earth.
No, okay.
That honor goes to the elephant birds, which stood 10 feet tall and roamed Madagascar thousands of years ago. And for reference, Sesame Street's Big Bird stands about 8 feet 2 inches tall, and the new research suggests
8 feet tall.
Yeah, 8 feet tall. The giant feetless or flightless birds, which were extinct between 500 and 1,000 years ago, were also nocturnal and blind. Yeah. So
I wonder what type of bird Big Bird is supposed to be.
A yellow big bird.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's
just a yellow big bird.
I don't think there's
what if we find out he's like a canary?
Oh, yes.
Like he's Tweety's older brother.
All right. Kind of looks like it.
That's a good one. That's right.
I loved Big Bird growing up, actually.
I did. And I still do. And I actually had a chance to go on the set, so I loved it.
Oh, you did?
I did. I was out there right there on the stoop.
Oh, that's really cool.
With Elmo and everything. I've got my picture with him.
Oh, that's really cool. Wow.
Yep. So there you go. That's my fun fact. WFLA News Time is now 8:38. I'm Cecily Wilson, News Radio 93.1 WFLA. Get these stories and more at WFLAOrlando.com. The third hour of Good Morning Orlando continues right now.
So remember when all those Democrats were freaking out in the presidential election because Trump might say something afterwards if Trump lost that it was not legitimate because of voter fraud or something? Remember when Democrats were outraged at Trump because he was questioning the legitimacy of elections? Oh, yeah, it's politics, though, so hypocrisy reigns supreme everywhere in politics. But this is the line we are hearing a lot now from the Democrats, and it's becoming more and more common. Bill Nelson was on MSNBC earlier this week, and he was talking just about that, bringing up what he says is voter suppression.
We must end all forms of voter suppression, make it easier for Americans to vote, and honor the ideal that we are governed by the majority and not the minority rule.
All right, so there's Bill Nelson. I mean, theoretically, yes, it sounds great. We don't want voters to be suppressed, but why is he bringing it up? He's bringing it up to question the legitimacy of Rick Scott because of, quote-unquote, voter suppression. Now, Andrew Gillum, who lost the governor's race, also brought this up. He was on MSNBC over the weekend. This is what he said.
On the suppression piece, our suppression, what happened here in the state of Florida is different than what happened in Georgia. In the state of Florida, the suppression tactics are enshrined in law. The fact that you got 67 counties and the rules between them are all very diverse and different between how elections are run.
Oh, no,
the fact that in my
control.
state you could have a signature rejected by someone who's not trained to interpret whether or not there are real differences in signature, and to have a person's vote completely invalidated because of that. The process for curing votes are very different between different counties here in the state of Florida.
Here is my problem with this argument that there was any kind of voter suppression in Florida. This is according to the Orlando Sentinel. In every Central Florida county, voter turnout surpasses the 2014 midterms by far. Voter turnout was huge in every county in the state of Florida. If they're trying to suppress votes, they are doing a terrible job at it, as some other people have said. It's hard for me to buy this whole argument, like Bill Nelson said, that it's not easy to vote. We have, 2 weeks of early voting. We have absentee ballots. We have online registration. We have you automatically registered in most cases when you get your driver's license, and even when you change your address on your driver's license. Then we have the voting on voting day. I just don't buy this. Turnout was massive in Florida. It's harder to believe that there was voter suppression. But this is also a line that's being put out in Georgia with Stacey Abrams. This is what she said in a speech after admitting that she lost.
Democracy failed Georgia. This is not a speech of concession. Because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that.
Except midterm voter turnout was huge in Florida, in Georgia. It surged in Georgia. There was no evidence whatsoever that people were not getting to the polls because of any type of voter suppression. It surged in Georgia. Voter turnout was huge. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal today, they brought up a great point, too, that Georgia was merely implementing the federal 1993 National Voter Registration Act, which requires states to conduct a general program that makes a reasonable effort to remove the names of voters who are ineligible by reason of death or change of residences. Also, the Wall Street Journal points out that if Mr. Kemp, the person who won the governor's race in Georgia, was trying to suppress voters, he did a lousy job. Georgia's voter rolls have swelled by more than 20% since 2010 amid an expansion in online registration. Voter turnout this year was up 16.4 percentage points over 2014 levels, which is even greater than the 12.6-point increase nationwide. So this is the common theme I keep hearing, that there's some kind of voter suppression, but there doesn't really seem to be actually any evidence of it. So the other thing that I hear a lot is that voter ID laws actually suppress turnout. This is another thing the Democrats do. Every time a Republican wants to put forward voter ID laws, usually it's the Democrats once again throw around voter suppression, voter suppression, voter suppression. In fact, though, there's no evidence that voter ID laws suppress turnout. In fact, of 11 states that adopted strict voter ID laws, 9 either saw increased turnout in 2016 or had turnout rates higher than the national average. It's according to the Heritage Foundation. They found that turnout actually went up in a lot of these states, according to their study, after voter ID laws were put in place. So it's just hard for me to believe when I see all of these things that we are doing to get people registered easily and out to the polls easily, and they can early vote and they can have absentee ballots, that there's any evidence of voter suppression, especially since voter turnout has been surging in the past few years.
But turnout is not the inverse of suppression. Suppression isn't about turnout.
What's it about then?
Well, suppression is about targeting a specific people group to keep them from voting.
Yeah, that's the argument, that they did target a specific people group, but there's no evidence of that either, because minority turnout is also really high.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. It's not necessarily about turnout, though. So, for instance, I don't believe there was any voter suppression in Florida. I'm not so sure about Georgia because I didn't really study it. But there have been instances in numerous states where, for instance, they will remove a polling place from a college campus. People see that as a form of voter suppression. We don't want these college kids to vote because they will vote Democratic. So we remove that polling place. We put it someplace where they can't get to, they don't have access to.
Well, I get that, and that's the argument.
And
usually the argument is exaggerated, but if there was actually suppressing votes, the turnout with those demographics would be lower. But the turnout in those demographics that they say are being targeted is not lower. That's the point I'm making, that we have voter ID laws, and they're saying this is going to suppress certain voters from coming out, but there's no evidence that it actually does suppress those voters because the turnout, even in those areas, is really high. It is basically the point I was making. Now, I always want to be a voice of reason on things, so this is my voice of reason of the day. It's actually Britt Hume. He was on Fox News Special Report last night, and this is what he said about this whole thing. Here it is.
If you were ever looking for an example of what the term double standard means, you could hardly do better than these claims of illegitimacy that have surrounded not only the Georgia race, but President Trump's original election also, not to mention all the monkey shines that have gone on down in Florida. And every time the Republicans were critical of the way the ballots were being handled in two particular counties down there where there were obvious, clear, and court-determined irregularities, they were accused of undermining democracy. But these complaints about the president and the complaint that Stacey Abrams has about the election in Georgia are not met with the same accusations. Indeed, they're participated in by such leading Democrats as Hillary Clinton, of course, and Sherrod Brown, the senator from Ohio, who also seems to think he might run for president. So there you have a wonderful example of it. It's okay for Democrats to criticize these election outcomes and declare them illegitimate, but if Republicans raise questions, even in the face of obvious irregularities, that's undermining democracy. Wonderful.
We have Orlando's news, weather, and traffic in just 2 minutes. News Radio 93.1 WFLA. So Bill Maher, comedian, political commentator Bill Maher on the left, put out a blog that blew up Twitter. He called it adulting. Says, the guy who created Spider-Man the Hulk has died and America is in mourning, deep, deep mourning for a man who inspired millions to, I don't know, watch a movie, I guess. This is what he said in the blog. He said, I read comics now and then. I read them now and then when I was a kid and I was all out of Hardy Boys. But the assumption everyone had back then, both the adults and the kids, was that comics were for kids. And when you grew up, you moved on to big boy books without the pictures. He says, but then 20 years ago or so ago, something happened. Adults decided they didn't have to give up kids stuff, and so they pretended comic books were actually sophisticated literature. And because America has over 4,500 colleges, which means we need more professors than we have smart people, so dumb people got to be professors by writing theses with the titles like Otherness and the Heterodoxy and the Silver Surfer. He's making the point that comic books are for kids, and this obsession with adults in comic books is not good for society, that they should read adult books. Now, the company, Stan Lee's company, blasted him. He got blasted on Twitter.
Oh, of course.
Here's what I think about it. It's not a bad point necessarily, but one thing I'll say is comic books are a lot more sophisticated than they used to be.
Yes, they are.
If you read a lot of the graphic novels, I was never a comic book reader, but I love the movies, and I watched all the cartoons, all the Batman, Superman cartoons, all of that stuff, Justice League. I love all that stuff. There's a part of me that understands what he's saying, but are comic books really any less sophisticated than sports in the big scheme of things?
Nice.
But is he blasting sports? I mean, I think it's good for a society to have somewhat of a release valve from the serious stuff.
I would say,
if you have a good balance in your life.
Yeah, I would say the only thing I agree with him on is that Americans, there was a time where we decided we didn't want to give up some of the stuff that we loved as a kid.
Yeah.
Because that's what all our movies are now. For us, it's all stuff in the 90s.
There is some people that are too obsessed with that life and not paying attention to real issues that maybe they should. They get way too obsessed. But I mean, for the most part, we need releases from the series. We need releases from politics. We need sports. We need comics. So blasting him like this, I think he doesn't really understand a lot of the new comic books, frankly.
No, I don't
he hasn't
think
read
he
any
does
of them
either.
because they are sophisticated. But I think he goes too far. All right, I appreciate you joining me. I will be back tomorrow, and I'll end the show just like Bud does. God bless you and God bless America.